I'm Casey. This is Tailgate Talk, only on Texas Carpenter. In today's video, we are going to be going over some of the basics and key tips and tricks and different methods of setting interior pre-hung doors. One of the reasons why we shim the opening prior to bringing the door in is so that, one, we can get it plumb, two, we can see if the stud itself is racked and or twisted, and we're able to correct almost all of that with the shims themselves by adding a little bit more to one side and or the other. And an easy way to be able to tell that is as you're using your level to plumb the stud. If the level's on edge and it's rocking back and forth, usually that means that your shims are kind of sitting conflicting to one another. So the way to correct that is just take a little bit more shim on one side and or the other, so that way we can bring the stud back to square.
So this is Dave. He'll be the one walking us through the steps in today's video. Here we're going to start with the shims at the bottom, then we're going to go up about 6 feet to the next shim, come back down, holding the level across both shims and filling in between. And then we'll take the level and work our way to the top. Go ahead and nail those off. We like to use an 18 gauge narrow crown stapler for this part of the process. Once it gets nailed off here, we'll take either a flush cutter and or the skill saw and go ahead and clip the shims just inside the sheetrock edge.
Check this trick out. As you'll see in this upcoming clip, being able to put doors on finished floor without having to use any shims underneath the jamb legs to get your header level is awesome, right? You don't have to worry about messing up a bottom of a jamb leg, or you don't have to worry about the floor being way off, because with this next simple trick, you'll be able to cut down your jamb legs prior to the door going into the opening. After your jamb legs are cut and after you know everything is level, all you're gonna do is take your door, put it in the opening, and start nailing it off. Have a look.
Here we'll grab our level, take it to the inside of the opening, making sure the opening is all clean and free of dirt and dust. And we'll be checking the floor for level because that's where your jamb legs are going to sit. Now we know that this hinge side needs to come up about 1/8 inch, so we'll take a shim, put it under the side that it needs to come up. Then we'll grab our pencil, we'll scribe that line, we'll measure the thickness of that shim. And what you're going to do is you're not going to take it off the hinge side jamb leg, you're going to take it off the strike side jamb leg. And the reason for that is that the hinge side needs to come up 1/8 inch. Then we'll go ahead and lower the strike side by that 1/8 inch. You'll grab a speed square and a skill saw, and you'll go ahead and transfer that line and make that cut. Get our door in the opening, grab our level, and check our stud for plumb as explained in this next segment.
As you just seen here, we check the stud for plumb. And why we're doing that is to see how much we are out by, and we are going to split the difference on the jamb leg. If the overall height of our opening is 98 inches and we're out by 5/16 out of plumb on that, we are going to split that difference on the jamb leg, on the hinge side. And so we will start at the top with the jamb leg 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch proud. And by the time we get to the bottom, being plumb, we'll be 1/8 inch over the sheetrock on the other side. And why we do that is so when it comes to the casing, we will be able to plane out the casing good at top and have a good finish result. And we can always adjust the case to base transition at the bottom more so than we can with the casing miter up top.
Here we will center our jamb into the opening, working down with a 15 gauge nail gun, putting one nail directly into the shims we put in the first step and just above and below each hinge.
I'm sure for you, a lot of you on this last video segment, that's a little bit different than what you've seen before. I know a lot of people have seen and were taught to take the door off of the jamb and start at the bottom and work your way up on the hinge side. And that's kind of one of the main differences of this video, is the fact that we do start at the top. And why we do this is, one, we don't have to take the door off of the jamb, and two is the casing miter is going to be your most critical point of view after the door is set. And being able to adjust that to our preference and leave us with a starting point for the casing that's going to give a perfect finished product is why we start at the top. Because as we work the door down and keep it plumb, we can always adjust the baseboard to casing transition and get that to look right a lot easier and less time consuming than we can compound mitering, casing, and doing all the tips and tricks on that. And also, a lot of the houses that we work in are 1x4 casing profiles, picture frame. And that's one thing that has to sit absolutely flat. Otherwise, you are going to see that the second it is painted and or stained. Now, if it's profile casing, a lot of times you can roll the casing, you can do compound miters if your sheetrock's a little proud, and it's no big deal. It comes together and it doesn't catch your eye. But when you have 3.5 inches on a miter on flat stock, just being out even a 1/16 catches your eye on that. Why shims are so important on the hinge side jamb leg is you always want solid contact between the stud and the jamb leg. So by putting the shims there, the nail is going through solid in the jamb leg, solid in the shims, and solid in the stud.
Here, as Dave hops over the strike side, we're going to start shimming the same way we did on the hinge side up at top. We're going to be inserting shims from both sides of the jamb leg to keep it flat all the way across the width of the leg itself. And as we go through this process, we're going to be opening and closing the door, making sure that we have solid contact with our door stop all the way down. And so we'll be opening and closing the door to insert the shims from both sides, as well as checking the door stop. Why this is important is if your hinge side leg is set plumb and level, but the strike side stud is out of plumb, maybe different, or out of plumb by 1/4 inch, if you just match the jamb leg with the sheetrock on both sides, then your door will be hitting the door stop either up top or at bottom, but you may have a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch gap either at the top or bottom. So once we set the hinge side, all we're doing is matching the strike side to the door. We're no longer pulling measurements. We're no longer checking for plumb. We are actually just opening and shutting the door as we go down with the shims, keeping solid contact with the door stop the whole time. Another good reference point for you is where the handle set plunge, it aligns with the strike plate mortise on the jamb leg. And that's another good reference, because if everything is plumb and level, but that's not lining up, then that gives you good reason to suspect that something was wrong when the door was built, and most likely their machines weren't calibrated or out of calibration, and that's what's causing that not to line up. And as we continue to go, we're just going to keep opening the door, making sure that everything looks right. And here, once you get it all nailed off, we're going to take our flush cutter and or a sheetrock blade and trim all those shims back. As you can see right here, this is what you want your door to look like. A solid 1/8 inch reveal at the strike side, the hinge side, and the header. This shim shown right here behind the hinge is what we call back shimming. If you have any space at all behind any of your hinges, you're going to take a micro shim and just fill that in and go ahead and cut it out. And what that's going to prevent is what we call the door being either hinge bound and or springing open. And in reference to saying the handle set plunge and the strike plate and the jamb leg lining up, this is what I'm talking about, how both the mortises align perfectly and you'll have no problems when it comes to hardware. As we jump around to the front side, you can see our solid contact top to bottom and all the way across with the doorstop.
So in conclusion, one of the most important things that is, in my opinion, never discussed enough in construction, finished woodworking, and or carpentry as a whole is what we like to call PLS. And that stands for plumb, level, and square. Once you're able to achieve plumb, level, and square, setting a door will be a breeze. Doing just about anything in construction and or carpentry works off plumb, level, and square. If you like what you've seen in today's video, don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button. I'm Casey, this is Tailgate Talk on Texas Carpenter, signing off. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.